Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us at lunchtime, wherever you are. It seems like we have folks calling in from all over the states, so thank you so much for taking some time to be with us. We're incredibly excited to talk today about advancing economic mobility and speaking with Kristopher Smith from LISC Jacksonville about their family wealth creation program. How today's going to work is we're going to sort of run through some background on both of our organizations. Kristopher is going to take us through the family wealth creation model that LISC is really leading the nation in. And we're going to talk through the specific program that we worked on together. And then I will take us through a demonstration of one of the deliverables of that project, which is a map that is serving as a risk assessment tool to understanding the concept of heirship properties, identifying them, and being able to provide service. So it's going to be a really deep and rich conversation today. We're so thankful you've joined us. Speaking here is Mara Kay. I'm a consultant at Fourth Economy. I'm on our data team, so I do a lot of our data analysis and mapping, as we'll demonstrate today. I've been with the Fourth Economy team for about 2.5 years, and I have a background in Main Street and small business economic development practice, but also housing as well. So this is really near and dear to me, and especially being able to work with such a strong partner, as will be a major theme in our discussion today. Fourth Economy as a whole is an economic development consultancy. We have 3 sort of primary plan projects that we work on in strategy, equity, and resilience. Today's project is really, touches on a number of these, but is really steeped in equity because of its focus on preserving Black wealth. But just to talk on some of the other project types that we work on, economic strategy really focuses on sort of traditional economic development, future planning. Hey, we previously were focused on another industry. The economy is pivoting, or we're on the other hand going to experience significant investment, and we need to prepare as a community and work on, the community benefit agreement out of that. So economic strategy is, a lot of our work and sort of traditional economic planning, but we bring a really community-focused element to that work that we do. Economic equity is embedded in all of our work, of course, but equity projects are really about sort of reparative, about economic reparations and working in communities that have been historically disinvested in. Here is an example of that in the family wealth creation tool that we're talking about communities of color and experiencing historic redlining and disinvestment in not only the housing, but the ability to attain homeownership themselves. Economic resilience is another arm of our work. This really focuses on environmental resilience and looking sort of the future of sustainable practices. Here, we're thinking about both place as well as workforce. And so this is a growing corner of our work, and really is where a lot of investment is going presently. So we're excited about this continual work as well. So as I alluded to, this project really focuses on economic equity. And when it comes to these projects, having a strong partner is essential. It's not nice, it's not convenient, it's absolutely essential. And we're so lucky to have that in Kristopher Smith, absolutely a visionary in this subject area and expert. So I'm going to hand it over to Kristopher now to introduce himself, LISC, as well as sort of start grounding us in the project itself.
Hey, thanks, Mara, and good day to everyone. The Fourth Economy team, just want to shout out to those folks, Jerry, Chris, Abby, everybody involved to help pulling this together. It's been a fantastic ride working with you guys over the past 6 to 8 months, and looking forward to more. So what LISC is about, what I'm about, I'll start with, I'm a native from Jacksonville, Florida, 5th generation. So my family, I come from a family of teachers and social workers. So they've poured this notion of service into me, and through that, that has led me along a professional sort of journey that includes sort of economic development and community development and government. And so today, I sit in the LISC, got the privilege of being part of a terrific team at LISC Jacksonville. And our focus is about how to help neighborhoods bring together the capital and the resources needed to help turn them around. And it's led by people. It's led by what's in the best interest of those who are in community, of community. And so with that, I encourage you to look at our website, lisc.org/Jacksonville for more background. But the idea of this family wealth creation, you can go to the next slide, bore out of the notion that in Jacksonville, as you can see there, from COVID, we saw a growth spurt, and that was a net migration of folks coming into Florida, but also people staying in place. And through that, over the last 3 years, we began to look at the stressors around housing. And so, as you can see there to the left, I won't read it to you, but essentially what struck me in 2021 was this notion of devaluation in majority Black neighborhoods. And what were the contributors to that? And so that required us to sort of peel back the onion a little bit and bring together data with lived experience and testimony from folks on the ground. So as you can see there, in 2022, 2023, home sale premiums were through the roof, or well over 20%, which was creating these neighborhood housing markets to become unaffordable for folks. And so when you couple that with vacancy and this history of practices and policies that have disproportionately impacted and harmed people of color, that comes together in place in neighborhood and generates this systemic issue around devaluation. And so I'm going to end this slide here and say the conversation I'm seeking and have had with Fourth Economy was not about individual sort of poverty and concern, but more looking at how is the system generating so much loss in terms of devaluation and land loss and displacement. And so next slide. When I think about our work, it's informed by an overall strategy that the organization takes, and that is using data to identify places and then using that information to inform conversations with residents and partners for designing interventions, resourcing those interventions for the purpose. And this blue sort of line there is important. Ownership preserved and equity gains accrued. And that would add without involuntary displacement. So you can go to the next slide, but that is the approach we took and how we are showing up. And this here gives you a sense of when you think about that strategy and apply sort of a well-being screen to it, if you move from sort of clockwise, if you're trying to achieve well-being, housing insecurity is a significant variable that affects well-being. I mean, I think that's borne out, right? And so housing insecurity drives economic depletion. So the more we can move people towards housing affordability and ergo housing security, that will increase infrastructure investments of all kinds, human and sort of also sort of structural, like stormwater and investments in education. Those things then lead to increased well-being. And so you can imagine how we're thinking about this work, bringing sort of a health screen to it. You can go to the next slide. So with that, I'll invite you to, again, click on that hyperlink and you can learn more about sort of the background related to the Family Wealth Creation Program. But here it is in a nutshell. Our approach was about preservation. It was the user preservation strategy. How do we think about wealth building opportunities in low to moderate income neighborhoods, and particularly for people of color? What are those ways to preserve wealth so that Black families who can build wealth using their home? And so among those efforts to quantify and mitigate the effects of policy and practice, one of the key sort of stressors that we identified through the data was this notion of heirs property. And for those of you who may not have a good sense of that term, again, I invite you to Google it, but essentially, it is someone who is living in a home who does not have clear marketable title to that home. So they do not have a formal ownership of that home, although they may be paying the taxes, although they may be paying the light bill and living there. Without that title, it does not allow them to collateralize that real estate. And so our work was about unencumbering that home asset so that families can collateralize that real estate and take the equity in their home and use it to help improve their own lives. In Jacksonville, Duval County, what we came to realize quickly was the data was suggesting that Jacksonville, Duval County had the highest rate of heirship in the Southeast United States and was among the highest markets in the country. And that was driving a lot of the stress in these communities. Next slide. This is an animation here that gives you a sense of what the impacts of these stressors like heirs property and vacancy have over time. So this is an animation. The center of this is the St. Johns River, runs through downtown, and the neighborhoods around it are part of the urban core. On the northern side, if you look closely, the green represents sort of the lower value valuation of homes. As you can tell with the legend at the bottom of the screen, red and yellow indicate higher valuation of homes. So over a 40 to 50-year window, you've seen neighborhoods that have a large number of incumbent households, legacy residents, BIPOC households, see only minimal change in their home values. Why is that? And that is what drove us to conversation with Full Economy about what can the data analytics reveal about what's driving this stagnant valuation and also leading to these neighborhoods being prone to displacement. One of the areas we learned through this is that the displacement primarily through COVID, we saw an acceleration of investor and corporate institutional activity in the low value neighborhoods, in the green. And what that did was then crowd out folks from opportunity for first-time home ownership or to preserve ownership within their families by passing that home down. Corporate institutional actors were offering 30 to 40, 50 cents on the dollar cash for low value homes in low value neighborhoods. And so our job is since defense. How do we defend that? And that's what we chose to sort of dig into with the data. You can go to the next slide. So I mentioned heirs properties. One of our strategies in our wealth creation work was to intervene around how to design an intervention around heirs properties. The larger the circle, as you can see, the higher the concentration of heirs properties in these states. And as you can note, California, Texas, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, the Carolinas, of course, all show significant concentrations of heirs properties. And so the work we're doing, we know is applicable to other markets across the country who have this similar issue. Now, the mix of stressors may be different. So heirs plus vacancy, heirs plus increased corporate activity, but we know heirs property and the heirship challenge compounds other housing stressors in neighborhood markets across the country. Next slide. So another way that we came to understand this heirs work was this graphic essentially is showing you the amount of activity happening around tax sales. Another stressor in our neighborhoods that was compounding the likelihood of displacement was the amount or the velocity of property tax sales in low-value neighborhoods. What you're looking at are the top 9 corporate actors in the Duval market who are buying properties below market value at tax auction. So this represents essentially 90% of the tax auction market in Duval County. And you can see it's dominated by corporate actors. And so, again, the point here was to show you when you couple Heirship with tax sales, vacancy rates, and other forms of stress in neighborhoods, what it leads to is this destabilizing force over time, which you saw in the earlier graphic showing up as devaluation. You can go to the next slide. So our response, this gets to the heart of the matter. So family wealth creation is essentially a multidisciplinary approach. It's an intersectional approach to preservation of homes, preservation, and essentially helping folks accrue the equity in their homes, and then allowing for them to have more options as to how they would like to use that equity and maintain that housing stability to pass that home down to other families or family members, or use it to start a small business, fund an education, or other means that support economic mobility. Essentially, what you're hearing me say is Heirship rates reduce intergenerational mobility. And by decreasing Heirship rates, we're able to increase the likelihood of economic mobility. That was our theory, and that's what we chose to bet on. And so the way in which we would decrease Heirship was through a series of these interventions that we were testing that you can see on the screen. Civil legal support, we all know in low to moderate income neighborhoods, is of dire need. And yet there is a significant a gap between those that need civil legal support and who are actually able to access it. So we sought to partner with legal services to help us bring the people that need those services together with other folks that need it most, so that they could understand their options around obtaining title to the property. One of the things I will skip to is this exemption enrollment issue. So it's a form of tax relief. And so when you acquire a home, when you buy a home, and that's your primary residence, then in Florida, there is a tax exemption on the value of that home as it is assessed. And so a tax exemption could be a homestead exemption, which means you live there, it's your primary residence. And because of that, the state of Florida reduces your housing value by $25,000, which reduces the value of your tax that you have to pay at the end of the year. So it is a tax relief strategy. And what we found was that because of Heirship and because of other issues around informal ownership of homes, that folks were not able to qualify for all of these exemptions, like senior exemptions or homestead exemptions or military exemptions, where you have to show proof of ownership. Well, in order to show proof of ownership, you need the ability to bring a title that has your name on it to the clerk of court or to the property appraiser's office. But exemption essentially is a tax relief effort. It reduces the taxable value of your home so that you pay fewer taxes at the end of the year back to the county. Next slide.
Actually, Chris, before you move on, we had a question to explain exemption enrollment.
Yes. And so what we did, if we go back to the prior slide, what we did there was you'll see in the mapping that Mara is going to share, what we decided to do was identify neighborhoods that have a low exemption rate. And we then worked with credible, trusted messengers embedded in those neighborhoods to go door knocking and to educate folks about the exemption enrollment process and increase their enrollment so that they could reduce their taxes and reduce the potential for home loss due to tax arrears. And so the enrollment was essentially, think about healthcare. Think of it that way. You're essentially trying to help someone connect with a service that will reduce a burden on them, okay? This is particularly important for seniors, by the way, for folks who may not be able to navigate either the legal system or the administrative system in a property appraiser or tax collector office. This is just a matter of sharing with you a graphic of the ecosystem we tried to create to help bring about these interventions related to family wealth creation. And so we wanted to show a graphic that enabled us to have all of our partners see themselves in this work. And so if you look at the top, comms, establishing why and articulate the way forward. This is super important for us to be able to show that in doing this work, it's about both helping people understand, sort of there's a learning piece to it, and there's also an action piece. But we've got to be able to break through the noise of what does an exemption enrollment mean? What does heirship mean? What is property taxes? How does that show up on my tax form? What can I do about it? We have to be able to share that information through folks that are credible in neighborhoods that will be heard. And those folks were the ones we partnered with. Research and identifying the problem and solutions to the left of this graphic speaks for itself. Community organizing, critical, that we help folks build power, especially the folks most impacted. That's done through our sort of leadership development, our grant making, and then infrastructure. How do we bring together data with trusted partners, with government officials, come together and have a shared understanding of the challenge? And then at the center of this, how do they then all come together and work and act with urgency to address the threat of home loss and the erosion of wealth in low-value neighborhoods? Next slide. So here's a few things we're learning about this work. Being data-driven and culturally relevant is critical. We know that the unclear ownership impacts home values as well as destabilizes neighborhood housing markets. And we saw the heirship opportunity as a way to leverage what we've known now, which is we're in the midst of, through the baby boomers, a $68 trillion wealth transfer, where folks are passing on wealth mainly through homes in low to moderate income neighborhoods. The single largest asset by which wealth is transferred is through the home. And so how do we help folks keep the home in the family? How do we help them increase the value of the homes without involuntary displacement? Those were some of the key pieces of our work. At the end of the day, we were trying to address this vicious cycle where ownership is preserved, homes are safe, and particularly Black homes are appropriately valued. Black homes, Black people, and Black communities. And so that helped us sort of create a map or a way forward as our conversation with Fourth Economy led to, well, what's the data analysis that's necessary to help us achieve this goal? And I'll end with sort of this piece of it, which is, at the end of the day, it was about, for heirship work, how do we find vulnerable households? How do we then help preserve said households? What resources can we connect folks to? And then how do we support households in the face of all of these sort of competing messages that people are being bombarded by? We were in a meeting, a community meeting a few months ago, and we asked folks, raise your hand if you received a call to buy your home. Every hand went up in the room. As a matter of fact, people were asking, what can they do about not getting these calls going forward? Because a lot of this was around the predation of trying to offer 30 to 40 cents on the dollar for a home and not help people build wealth through their home. So I think with that, I will pause here and see if there's any reaction or comment.
If anybody has any questions at this time, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We have a moment to reflect. Heirship is obviously a very technical topic, so we want to make sure we're all on the same page before we jump into the next section. It looks like someone has their hand up.
Yeah, that's me. Thanks, Mara. I appreciate it. Hi, Kristopher. I appreciate what you bring into the forefront here. This is awesome. I have very similar background to you, and that I know exactly what you mean when you say that social work and those teachers, really put the emphasis about service. And I too I'm in Atlanta, and I recently actually moved here for this job. And what I found was every house, we couldn't go fast enough. Every house was being picked up by corporate interests.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, has there been any, sort of legislative lobbying going on against this kind of thing? Because I think I'm not sure, but my theory is that this is going on all around the country, and everybody's experiencing the same things. This huge upward movement in home pricing, etc.
Thanks for the question, Aliza. And I hope I'm saying your name right. Is it Aliza?
Yes.
Aliza, so that's the policy move here is critical. And I think more policy research is needed. Let me just say that. We don't know enough about what those legislative tools might look like. I have, and I will make available legislative strategies that would essentially cap non-resident ownership in a particular census tract. Okay. Now, how that's enforced, I'm not totally sure, but I will definitely share with Fourth Economy, who can make it available to everyone, the two legislative tools that I have seen, mainly from the Midwest, too, Lisa. I haven't seen anything in the South. So my short answer is I haven't seen anything in the South that's taken that approach and been successful. We're thinking about ways in which we can bring something to our state legislature, but I'll admit, against the backdrop of our political environment, that's a tough road though.
In your personal opinion?
Yes.
That is,
Yeah.
I mean, that could be the working theory, why
That's
there's
correct.
this huge escalation. I appreciate it.
Yeah. We've tracked it. And so another thing I'd say is it's unclear how local governments are tracking ownership and changes there. So I would encourage that conversation to occur in your municipalities. Like, how do we know pre-COVID, post-COVID, any change in ownership rates and corporate ownership rates in census tract or neighborhoods? And if we're seeing significant changes there, what can we do to remedy that? How can we reduce that? And how do we quantify the harm, the future sort of potential for home ownership decreases, right, by increasing corporate and institutional ownership?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
It looks like we had a similar question in the chat. Please let us know, Denise, if that answered your question. In the meantime, we'll go to Andrew with their hand up.
Hey, thank you for the presentation today, and I'm excited to see what comes next. And I grew up in St. Johns County, so I'm from the Jacksonville area and love Jacksonville. So excited to hear about this. I was curious about how in these topics about valuation and heirs properties and title, to how Jacksonville is seeing this intersect with climate change and resilience too, knowing that a lot of federal programs too, FEMA is also working about to remove barriers to accessing federal aid, and then buyouts and other flood projects especially touch on property valuation as well for cost benefit analysis. So I was curious how LISC has seen that intersect. And I know Jacksonville's a little funky too, because you showed that map of neighborhoods. You see Ortega, San Marco, Riverside, wealthier, wider areas that are on the water. So I was curious how you're seeing this work intersect with any of climate resilience work.
It's a great point. So real quick, I'll mention one way we see the intersection front and center. So as you know, Jacksonville and essentially coastal communities are seeing more. They're seeing more, and they're seeing stronger storms. And so the opportunity for for neighborhoods to bounce back from storm damage, Andrew, is critical. And so that means neighborhoods and specific homeowners need to be able to qualify for FEMA assistance and local housing assistance. Well, if you aren't able to provide proof of ownership, Andrew, then you are not going to be able to access those resources. So one very practical way is FEMA has changed its criteria to allow now for Heirship households to qualify for FEMA assistance. We need local municipalities to do the same and follow lockstep with that practice, so that when storms hit vulnerable neighborhoods, that those neighborhoods can bounce back and receive and access all the resources needed. There's also this notion around, Jerry's right, this notion of deed theft. But I would say to you, Andrew, where LISC sees itself is, how do we now bring together and work on initiatives that are at the intersection of housing security and climate resilience? And with that, what data analysis will help us understand and predict potential harms by flood, by heat, or other environmental stressors, and what can be done to now mitigate for that through programs like home repair, through programs like acquisition, through programs that help reduce the vulnerability to environmental factors, particularly water, Jerry, because of our coastal communities. The issue of flood insurance and insurance writ large is one that is just looming for our neighborhoods, because we see that as being such a critical piece of how to help these neighborhoods be more resilient. So I know it's a little bit of a non-answer, but I wanted you to hear my initial thoughts on it.
That's a wonderful question, Andrew. I know it was one we talked about early on, especially some of the, before FEMA had that change, that was some of the early Heirship cases we heard about, were folks who had experienced flooding going to claim some FEMA assistance and not being able to get it because they couldn't actually show proof of ownership. So certainly something we're thinking about. We're about to walk through an exercise where we talk about a lot of indicators, and I'm sure we could think off the top of our head of many, many more that we could add on, like being in a floodplain, for example, would be an excellent one to complement.
I actually did want to dive in on when people were asking about some of the legislative opportunities. You know, one of the things we discussed is we were looking at the liens and the amount of liens. These are not always that much in terms of a dollar amount. When you compare that to the homestead exemption and the senior exemption, that could almost wipe out the lien. So one legislative fix is getting the community to credit somebody if they weren't taking an exemption that they were eligible for.
Exactly.
Using that to they've been overpaying their taxes, wipe out the lien. You know, don't punish people, you know, and then take their household wealth.
You know, another, Jerry, could be just put a moratorium on any household claiming senior exemption. They're exempt from property tax sale auction. Like, we'll come up with a payment structure that works, but to displace a senior citizen due to tax arrears just feels it's counterintuitive to what we're trying to do with building neighborhoods. And someone who's been in a neighborhood 20, 30 years, but for some kind of financial shock or other shock, you know, given COVID or other issues that may crop up, why not think about a way that take the equity they built in that community and use that as a way to stave off home loss due to tax sale? So that would be another one I'd just throw out.
Other questions from the group while we have a few minutes left together? Good, Dennis.
Thank you. Dennis Candy. I direct a Center for Community Engagement at Smith College in Massachusetts. And I'm just wondering, what do you see as the role of colleges and universities? I mean, I know we have a role in having a voracious appetite for land and grabbing inner city land, but on a more positive note, around this kind of research and data in particular, do you see a role, and are there, colleges or centers for engagement like my own playing a role in some of this work? Thanks.
100%. I think, and I'm asking my colleagues for the comment to weigh in here, but one, you have other schools and institutes there, like the School of Law, that could be critically important to helping provide civil legal services at no cost or low cost to residents that can't afford and don't understand how to navigate the legal or the financial bureaucracies required to resolve any type of housing stressor. So that would be one. Two would be, we need more and better research around the policy and sort of legal sort of landscape. A lot of these policies are at that local level that require state law change or county level, city level law change. And so policy is critically important. So investing in policies that can actually help improve and reduce the harm caused by current policies that are on the books. Okay, so those would be two, and the third would just be straightforward, getting embedded in neighborhoods with credible messengers and trusted partners, listening to what they see as the priorities are in their neighborhood, and then helping them develop plans and connecting to resources to actually do the things that they feel are necessary to stabilize those neighborhoods. Engagement on that level, I think, quick to listen, slow to speak, and being willing to be patient and going through a process with folks to build trust over time. If there's one thing I'd say to you, Dennis, that is critically important as an institution, it is to invest in the process of building trust with the folks that are most impacted.
Yeah, and we can always do better, but we have some, I think, good long-term partnerships with neighborhood organizations in place. We're not focused, or haven't yet focused on this issue. What about the data side of it, Maura, and colleges and outfits like Smith College?
Yeah, Dennis, it's how I got involved in it, right? I was lucky enough to be a part of a college exercise that did door-to-door surveying in a gentrifying neighborhood about displacement, and that was it. That was the hook. And so I think even like community engaged research and understanding how to do that properly is a really important place to start. Working with community, as Kristopher said, those perfect framing, just understanding public data, all of that is really, really good, a good start for any kind. And I'm sure you're already doing all of this. This is nothing new, but I'll defer to Professor Pavis on that.
I was going to say the Western Pennsylvania Regional Data Center at the University of Pittsburgh is a good example of the kind of partnership. They're a neutral agent that can take all of this data. I mean, now they're locally focused in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, but having that in communities all over where you can have this data, have it cleaned, have it ready, then match it up with the law school clinic or the community engagement efforts and outreach efforts, that can be a powerful model when it's explicitly linked and not left to operate, as different herds of cats, but linking it across those programs and silos.
Yeah, those links seem to be really, really important. And as you know, I've got some history and connection to Pittsburgh.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great
Thanks.
question, Dennis.
Thank you so much. And I know that's a wonderful questions all around. I know we're at time, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today and know, this is a huge issue. We know this is everywhere. You may be using different language, tangled title, lost title, that sort of language, but we're all on the same page. We're talking about the same issue, and we really hope that, even though capacity is what it is, this becomes a part of your affordable housing practice, and we'd love to talk to you about it. So please, please, please reach out to us. We'll drop our emails in the chat here, myself, any of my colleagues, as well as Kristopher, of course, who is truly a leading practitioner. Just got a call from all of the Heirship entities to talk about this further. So we want to thank you so much. Kristopher, do you want to plug any upcoming? Just visit LISC's website, download their family wealth creation information. Please, use that as a tool to inform your work. We're going to keep working on this. This is obviously not a solved issue, and so we love to work with you as well. You'll expect a follow-up from us that'll have some information. We also wrote some blogs about this if you want to do some further reading. And of course, we have webinars all the time. So keep a lookout for additional topics. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we hope to see you again.
Thanks, folks.